There are two basic motivating forces, fear and love. When we're afraid, we pull back from life. When we are in love, we open to all that life has to offer with passion, excitement, and acceptance. We need to learn to love ourselves first in all our glory and our imperfections. If we cannot love ourselves, we cannot fully open our ability to love others or our potential to create. Evolution and all hopes for a better world rest in the fearlessness and open-hearted vision of people who embrace life. And that was said by John Lennon. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Max Igan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I'll be your host for the next hour. And some very wise words there from John Lennon, folks. It is so important that people embrace life, because when people embrace life, that is where the solutions to all our problems lie. It wasn't until I began to embrace my life that all the solutions presented themselves in my life. And believe me, folks, my life was not always a good thing. In my younger years in life, I was my own worst enemy. I really was hard on myself. I was very down on myself. I didn't like myself. Even my voice, I didn't like my voice because my voice didn't sound like other people's voices. I didn't like the fact that I was tall because I was taller than the average person. I didn't like the fact that I didn't really fit in anywhere within society. I just couldn't make it work. I desperately wanted to make society work for me, and I just couldn't make it work. And I felt very, very different to other people. I had huge difficulties with my relationships with people. There didn't seem to be any real substance. It seemed that it was often about collecting stuff and social status. I must have spent quite literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of my life in tears when I was young. When I was younger, I cried so many tears for the world and for my lack of understanding of the world and my lack of ability to fit into the world that it was just unimaginable. And it wasn't until I really stepped back and began to objectively look at the world and look at society, mainly because I was desperate to find out why I didn't fit in. How come all these other people could make it work and they could make a profit and they could gain all this status and they could have all this stuff, but I couldn't make it work? What was wrong with me? And these are the questions that I was asking, and it wasn't until I really began to step back and look at society objectively that I began to realize that I couldn't make it work because I wasn't a sociopath. And that is not to say that I'm saying that anybody who has a successful business and anybody who is successful, anybody who has made it, in inverted commas, is a sociopath. Not at all. It's just that the need to profit from people in order to function within this society is itself sociopathic. It's the imposition of commerce itself, which forces people to conduct business in a sociopathic manner. Otherwise, the business cannot function as a business. But I just felt things too deeply in my life to be able to profit from people. I'd tried profiting from people. I'd tried doing business deals and making money on the side and doing all this sort of stuff. And it just didn't work. I could never do it. I could never do it and feel any degree of comfort in myself. I always felt like I'd done the wrong thing because I'd made a profit from somebody. And even now when I look back at it, I can see that most of the deals that I tried to do, they all went wrong in some way or other anyway. So it's almost as if the universe was trying to tell me that I shouldn't be doing things this way. It's not about commerce. It just took me a little while to learn the lesson. And even when I was a child, I could never understand why money ever got in the way of fixing a problem. When I was a child, I remember the adverts on TV, the main adverts we used to see for World Vision and organizations such as that were always talking about the starving millions in Ethiopia when I was a child. And I could never understand how anybody could be starving in this world. And my mother would say it was because we can't afford to feed them and they can't afford to feed themselves. And I could just never understand what money had to do with it. I could never understand why commerce would interfere with someone being fed. It just didn't make sense to me. And this was before I'd even started school. This is when I was about 4 years old, or possibly 5 years old. But it was before I was going to school, and we just got a television set. And I remember saying to my mother one day, I'd said, "But Mum, at the end of the day when we've done all of our shopping and we've come home with our food, and everybody else has done all their shopping and gone home with their food, there's still all of this food left in the stores. All we have to do is take half of all that and send it over to these people in Ethiopia, and they won't be starving anymore. It's really simple." And she would look at me and say how sweet it was and what a lovely gesture it was, but it just didn't work that way. And I could never understand why. And so I grew up through this society wondering how I can make this work, how I can make it fit in to my life, to my thought patterns, how I can make myself fit into it. Halfway through my school years, I realized that it just wasn't going to happen. I could never figure this stuff out. I could just never understand what this society was about, and I just couldn't do what it wanted me to do. And there had to be a better way. There had to be a way of expressing the art of my life. And so I became a musician, and I spent most of my life as a musician. And I spent most of my time researching ancient history on the side when I wasn't playing guitar or mixing front of house for some band. And all through these years, I did, on occasion, attempt to step back into society and try to do it, try to get a place to live and start conducting business and getting a job and doing all the things that normal people do. And I could just never make it work because I simply could not get my mind to function within that type of reality. To me, it was just too superficial. There was no way to express the art of my life. I felt like I was stepping away from myself in order to mold myself into something that I wasn't. Every time I attempted to work within that system, that's the way I felt. So I always fell back on music, back on playing guitar, or back on mixing front of house, or back on selling artwork. I sold a lot of artwork on the streets and in markets for a couple of years there as well. But what I'm attempting to say here is that it wasn't until I really put down all of the external stuff that I'd been measuring myself up to, all of the parameters that society had set me, and began to really just do what my heart told me to do and embrace the experience of life itself, that life began to unfold for me. And the reason I've brought you that story about my dysfunctional youth is because there are many people out there that I perceive to be having similar experiences and who are very down on themselves because of these experiences and who judge themselves poorly because of their inability to fit into a society which is essentially sociopathic, because it is a sociopathic society, folks. And I'm reminded of a wonderful quote by Jiddu Krishnamurti that said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." And that is exactly what we've got. And if you are a person out there and you simply cannot make this society work, well, now you know why. It's probably because you are, in fact, sane, when most of society is exactly the opposite. You see, most of society is in a state of collective hypnosis. Most of society believes the commercial system is real. And the imposition of the commercial system over the mind of man is really the biggest problem that we face. It's the source of all of the difficulties that we currently see on this planet, and it is one of the most difficult things, one of the most difficult mental states to break people out of. Because many people on the planet, many people, the vast majority of people on the planet, simply cannot imagine what life could be, or how life could even be, were it not for commerce. Because commerce has been so deeply ingrained into their mentality, the need to pay to be alive, the need to pay for everything that you use or do, the mere concept that time itself is worth money, is a huge problem, and it's the source of all of the difficulties we face. And as I said, it is the most difficult thing to break people out of, because it is so ingrained into people's psyche that they cannot perceive of what life without commerce would be like, or even that it could possibly be. For many people, the whole meaning of their life is commerce. This is what they spend every moment doing, is collecting paper, collecting more digits in their bank account, collecting more numbers on the screen. And our society has been structured in such a way so as the more numbers you have on the screen, then the more respect you have from society, regardless of how you obtained those numbers and who had to suffer due to your actions along the way. As long as those actions were done through subsidiary companies and your actual hands are clean through legal loopholes, it's all good. It doesn't matter. You've got all the dollars, and so we love you. And that's just the way our society's been structured, folks. And this, of course, is designed to create exactly the type of world that we see today. And so the question is, what do we do about it? Here we are. What can we do about this situation? Well, the first hurdle to overcome is to, of course, become aware of the situation. That really is the first hurdle. I mean, I speak about the problems that we have in the world very often on the show, but I do so simply because you need to be aware of the problems, and I believe that when you look at these problems from the correct perspective, you find the information to be actually quite empowering. I do, folks. I don't get depressed over any of the stuff that I talk about on the shows. I find all of the information to be empowering because I believe knowledge is power, and with the knowledge of what the problems are, you then have the ability to deal with these problems. So, okay, how do we deal with the problem? Well, we deal with the problem by first becoming aware of it, by disseminating the information to the people around us, and by questioning authority on every single occasion that we are able to do so. Any single thing, this council, this government, state government, federal government, any person who claims to have any authority over you, you need to question their actions. Question why they believe they have authority over you. Question why you have to pay this fine, why these new rates have come in, why this new council tax is in place. Question all of these things, folks. We need every person on the planet to start doing this. Start writing letters to your government and start questioning every single thing they do. That's step 2. And please understand here, folks, that I'm calling it step 2 because I have said that it's what you should do after you become aware, which I happen to mention first, so we can call that step 1. But really, these are things that you can do in sync all together. They are all part of the same plan. There are really no steps. These are all things you should start doing. You absolutely should become aware of the problems, and you absolutely should start questioning authority on every single occasion that you can. And of course, above all else even, you should step into the art of your own life. Step into this experience. Realize that it's not about all the external stuff. It's about you. It's about what's in your heart. It's about the legacy you leave behind in this world. It's about what you do with the information that you've got and how you improve reality by your presence in it. Start leading by example in all that you do. Start living your life in Lakesh with everybody that you know. Start being a pleasure to be around. Start improving this world simply by the energetic state that you're in because of the zest and the love and the embrace that you have for this wonderful experience that we call life. Because life is not supposed to be a struggle. Life is not supposed to be an experience whereby you are measured by the amount of digits on the screen. You have to spend your time collecting stuff and trying to improve your social status because it is the only way you'll be viewed as being worthwhile by the rest of a corrupt society. You don't have to spend your life in that way, folks. You are here to be the unique expression of creation that is you and to experience and express the art of yourself. And that's what everybody on this planet should do. And just imagine if everybody did that. If everybody started doing that, then the world would change in one day. And I believe that's a huge part of it, folks. Coming to terms with yourself, realizing that you are perfect in all that you do and you have no reason to judge yourself by any of the parameters that have been set up by this society. Life is not about that. Life is far more than that. It's coming to these realizations, folks. This is what is needed in the world. This is a big part of it. Once we change our perspective and we start coming to these realizations and start embracing ourselves and embracing the art of our own life, then the world will change. Then we'll realize that we don't need government at all. As I've said many times recently, folks, in the world today, the only reason we really need government is to address all the problems that the government creates for us. So they've kind of created a situation whereby we need them to fix up their mess. And just realizing that problem is a huge part of it as well, because that gives us the ability to step above that as well. You see, we can step above the system once we understand that the system is fiction, folks. Once we understand what's really going on in this world, we can step above it all. Once we realize that all we've got in this current social and economic system that we live under is a system of slavery, a system of human trafficking, once we realize exactly what's going on here, once we realize how much we've been led away from the art of ourselves and led away from the truth of ourselves and led away from ourselves in general by the system of commerce that's been imposed over our mentality, then we have a hope of creating a better future. But we've got to realize these things first. We've got to really step back and see things for what they are. And the commercial system really is the biggest problem that we face. It's the source of all of our difficulties, folks. When you look at all the corners that have been cut in production that have caused problems, when you look at all the corners that have been cut in industrial practices that have caused environmental catastrophes, all of these things have happened because of financial incentive. It's been far more profitable to pollute the environment, to destroy the world, than it has been to do otherwise. The only reason we have homelessness and the only reason we have starvation is because the commercial model has been superimposed over the mind of man, whereby we would actually allow people to starve because there isn't the money to feed them. But you don't eat money, you eat food, and the food is right there, but these people can't have the food because they don't have the money. It's ridiculous. And even looking at a scenario like that, you can easily see what the real purpose of money is, and that is to create scarcity. I mean, sure, money can create abundance for those who have a lot of it, but they can only achieve that abundance by putting other people into a state of scarcity. Because people are only able to achieve monetary abundance or monetary prosperity, which is what it really is, rather than abundance. But they're only able to achieve this prosperity due to their exploitation of other people. So it's out of balance right from the onset, and there's no way it can ever be in balance. The imposition of a commercial system is always going to create a situation whereby there are haves and there are have-nots. And it creates that situation because that is the very purpose of the commercial system. The purpose of the commercial system is to create scarcity and to make more and more of humankind expendable, so that more and more of humankind can be discarded along the way, so that eventually the only population we have left are those people that are needed to run the machine. People talk about the big depopulation plan that's coming, and folks, it's being implemented via the economic model. That's what they do. They just go up the rungs of the ladder and they expel more and more of humanity along the way, and nobody really notices what's going on the lower rungs because they're all caught up in this social system whereby they're measuring themselves by their stuff, and those people that are being discarded, it's okay to discard them because they're lesser people, and I can tell they're lesser people because they had less stuff than me. And that's the mentality of this society. And that's where the depopulation comes in, and it's happening right before our eyes, folks. It's happening every day. And it's happening in places that you wouldn't expect it to be happening, folks. It's happening to farmers here in Australia. If you really want to see depopulation in motion, folks, have a look at the coal seam gas industry. We've got the utterly corrupt New South Wales government in Australia now pushing this industry as the most important industry in New South Wales. In other words, the New South Wales government in Australia believes that the most important thing it can do for the people of its state is to destroy the water table in order to line their own pockets and to send all of Australia's natural resources straight off overseas for foreign corporations to profit from. This is the stance of the New South Wales government. These scumbags, folks, these criminals who actually believe that they have the power to destroy our water table and believe they're going to get away with it because they wrote rules in a book. This is the attitude that they're displaying against the people. Hopefully this will cause the people of New South Wales to wake up. Hopefully it will cause the people to view the New South Wales government as an entity that they have lost all confidence in, and an entity that needs to step down to be replaced by people who have at least some degree of intelligence, or at least enough intelligence to see the danger in destroying Australia's groundwater in order to support a fictional economic model. Most especially when all of the economics that are being generated by the industry will in fact go straight overseas. And the loss of these farmers to supply Australia with food will of course ripple out to the communities in general across Australia, and we'll see a huge rise in the cost of food because most of our food will need to be imported because our food bowl is being destroyed by this insanely corrupt and highly pollutive and incredibly environmentally toxic industry. And so ultimately coal seam gas will see a further degradation of the standard of living of the general population in Australia and a further erosion of any security that people have built up in their lives. And this of course ties in very much with Agenda 21 as well, because the goal is to push people into concentrated pockets of civilization such as cities. They don't really want people living in the country, folks, because it's very difficult to control people who are self-sufficient and living in a rural setting. And they don't really want people running private farms. They want big, huge monocrop farms all running GM food for the population, because once they impose GM food over the population, they can marginalise different sections of population and they can control the population by simply controlling the genetics of the food that the people consume. As we've clearly seen from studies that have been conducted on animals, it will be very easy to marginalise and control sections of the population, indeed whole countries, by feeding them certain types of food, because you can induce sterility within a certain population over 3 generations. These people will believe that they're getting good food, but over 3 generations you can reduce them to a state where they are now unable to breed. And they won't even realise that it's the food that's doing it to them. They'll just think there's some virus that's suddenly taken over their country and people seem to be having some sort of genetic problems. They'll never really attribute it to the food, or even if they do, it will be far too late. But as I said, we can see through studies that have been conducted on animals that this is exactly what genetically modified food does. It causes severe genetic damage to the subject, but it takes a series of generations for this damage to become apparent. And as I said, of course, then it's too late, folks, because what are you going to do? Say, oh, look, I believe your food's been causing this genetic damage with our population, and what's Monsanto and these companies going to do? They say, well, look, I'll tell you what, we don't think so, but just to keep you safe, we'll have a study. We'll conduct a 30-year study on the effects of this food to see what happens. But then, of course, in 30 years, everybody's dead, and there's no reason for them to complete the study. That's what they always do, folks. They go, oh, look, it's terrible that this problem's happening. We'll conduct a study over the next 10 or 20 or 30 years just to see what the results are, when we already know what the results are, which is why we're complaining to them in the first place. But they don't address the problem, folks. They just tie it up in red tape and bureaucracy and let things play their course. And very often people are programmed enough to think that once they've got a result, that the government is actually conducting a study into it, then they've got a positive result and things are going to move forward. They don't realise that it's all part of the plan. The study's already been done and we know that the government's wrong, which is why you are sick in the first place, which is why you went to government to begin with. So yes, folks, the study's already been done. You were the study. People just don't seem to think about things that way. And they always believe they have to petition government to bring about change, when really what we need to do is to step above the whole thing, and rather than petition them to mandate that they implement the changes we want, and if they refuse to do so, to dismiss them through the power of a united community. And that may sound like an impossibility, folks, but really it's not. Not if the community can unite and realise that all we are dealing with are people who wrote a whole bunch of silly rules in their silly books, and they trained us to be silly enough to believe that their silly rules give them the ability to steal everything we own from us. And that's really the whole situation in a nutshell, folks. It's all basically a state of collective stupidity that we are in as a species, and we really do need to wake up to ourselves and put things right again, folks. We don't have to let government do anything that it's doing, and all we have to do to stop it is to remember who and what we are and stand in the power of our flesh. I've said that to you so many times before, and it may sound simplistic, but the fact is that it's true, folks. That's what we can do, because There isn't anybody on this planet who has any more or less worth or any more or less authority than anybody else. We are all in this together, and we are all created equal. The choice of whether to claim that equality and to stand in that equality lies with each individual. It's just that we've been trained not to think that way. We've been trained to always be subservient to authority. This is what our scholastic years are all about, folks. That's the main purpose. Apart from the fact that they train you to think in a left-brain manner, they also train you to always respect authority, because it's essential to the smooth running of this system that we believe the authority is real, that we believe the rules are real, that we believe the laws are actually real, and that we believe commerce is real. If it wasn't for that, this society and the slavery system that it supports could not function in any way, shape or form. Its functionality can only be achieved through the compliance of the people, and this can only be achieved by removing the people from any true knowledge of themselves. And that's what's been done, folks. It's been a very clever system. But really, when you step back and look at it, it becomes virtually transparent, and you can really see how the mechanism works. Because it's all a facade, folks. This whole legal, economic, social structure that enslaves us, it's just a facade. It's just a matrix. It's not real. And we don't have to do what these people say. In fact, quite the opposite. They're just public trustees, folks. That's all they are. And if we can put down our stuff with each other and unite as a community, we have the ability to change the world. We could do it today. We could do it tomorrow. We can do it any time we decide to put down our stuff with each other and participate in building a better future. It's really that simple. But I think we're at break time here now, folks, so I'll leave it there for now. It's a pleasure having your company with me on the show today, and I will speak to you again in a few minutes. Thanks for listening. And welcome back, folks. So, the reason I went through my dysfunctional youth for you at the start of the broadcast today was because I wanted to point out to you how sometimes we are very insecure about our own uniqueness, because that's really what was going on with me. Really, when I look at it, it was a product of television. It was a product of the programming around me, because I saw these images of people on the television who were a certain way, and they looked pretty cool, and you kind of, when you're a kid, you aspire to be like these people, and I didn't see that I was anything like any of these people, and so I felt myself to be a lesser person. I was essentially repelled by my own uniqueness. I was essentially repelled by my own inability to be like the role models that had been put there for me to aspire to. And it took a very long time before I realized that this was quite literally a program that I'd been running. I had been programmed when I was a child to believe that I had to be a certain thing, and I had to behave in a certain way, and I had to aspire to certain goals. And if I was not able to do so, I would never be successful. Because, of course, success is measured by social and financial status, according to the parameters of this society. And yet I was simply not able to profit from people. Even when I was doing the right thing and it was all above board and that's the money that I was supposed to be getting, I still felt bad about selling something for more than I bought it for, or for making something and selling it at all, because usually if I made something, I'd want to give it away. When I was younger, I did hundreds and hundreds of very, very detailed drawings and pieces of artwork when I was a teenager, and I gave every single one of them away. Most of them I gave to the one person. She was kind of hanging around. Whenever I'd finish a picture, she'd say thank you, and I'd give it to her, and she'd put it in her photo album. And she wasn't even my girlfriend. She was just a friend. She was just part of the crew that we used to hang around with. And so I've always found it very, very difficult to be able to profit from people. It's just not part of my psychological makeup. And every time I've tried to do it, it's always gone wrong. I just, something happens and I can't do it. I just much prefer to give things. It just feels natural to me to give. I remember when I was younger, I had a lot of friends who used to pay out on me because I gave so much. I would give something away and one of my friends would look at me and say, "You're an idiot. Why do you do that? Why do you give everything you own away? You're a fool. You could have sold that to him. You're an idiot. You're never going to make it." And I just used to think, why would you sell something to a friend? Why would I want to turn one of my friends into a commodity? Why would I want to use them to profit from? Why, if I've got something here that they want that I don't particularly use anymore, would I not give it to them so they could experience the same pleasure that I did from that object when I did use it? Why would I want to, rather than give it to them, sell it to them and thereby remove some of that pleasure from them? Wouldn't it be more pleasurable for them as a gift? Why would I want to view every relationship as a business transaction? And like I said, folks, I tried for a while. I tried to do the things other people did, and I just couldn't do it. It just didn't work for me. Whenever I tried, it all went wrong, and I just couldn't ever do it. I just always believed that giving was the best thing to do, and I always believed that if we respected each other and we treated each other like ourselves, then all of these problems wouldn't exist. And this was way back when I was a teenager. I felt like this, and it just carried through into my adult years. Which I tell you, folks, it makes for a pretty dysfunctional person. When you're that way, you think that way, and you feel that way, and you're trying to survive within this society, it's a pretty dysfunctional life that you're living. And in many ways, I would say that, according to the parameters of this society, my life was very dysfunctional. But when I look at it as a human experience, I think it was highly functional. I think it was absolutely perfect because it brought me to where I am now. It brought me to the understandings that I have now. And without having those experiences, I would never have gained these understandings. I would never have gained the insights that I have. And the reason I've gone through all this, folks, is because I'm perceiving that there is a lot of people out there who feel the same way, and a lot of people who judge themselves poorly when really it's because of their uniqueness. And it's because they see their own uniqueness as being a flaw and separating them from what they think they should be according to the parameters of this society. But folks, this society is dysfunctional. This society has nothing to do with supporting the human experience. It has nothing to do with helping you express the art of your life, and everything to do with removing you from the art of your life and molding you into something that you're not, into a clone that society wants you to be, and training you to function in a certain way whereby your actions benefit the ruling hand at the top, the slave masters who run the whole system. That's the way this society has been constructed. So if you're feeling that your uniqueness is detrimental to your health, your uniqueness is a handicap, then you're really looking at things from the wrong way. And again, you're only looking at things that way because you're programmed to look at things from that way. You're trained to look at things from that way. And it's very clever, folks. It's a very clever subliminal program that they've got running here, because very often we will feel inspired by our uniqueness while judging ourselves poorly because we're different from everybody else at the same time. It's kind of like an opposing dichotomy that's happening within our minds, right there at the back of the minds. It's there in the subconscious, very often in a lot of people, and it's a program. Because really it is our uniqueness that is the most valuable thing that we have, each one of us. This is who you are. And so, of course, it is the most valuable thing that you have. Because the most valuable thing you have is your consciousness. The freedom to think what you want to think and to do what you want to do. The freedom to be as unique as you are able and to express yourself in a way that only you can. And this is everything that our society attempts to lead us away from. Because this society does not like independent thought. It does not like free thinking. It does not like new ideas, because with a new idea comes a shift in the role of government. When people start introducing new ideas into the pot, then it means change, and change may mean that the government may lose its power over something. It can't have change. You can't implement a new idea unless we can find a way of regulating that idea so that it fits within these little parameters and we can tax it. That's what government's about. And it's all designed to remove you from the human experience and to squash the uniqueness of yourself, to put you in a position where you are never able to fully express the art of your own life and never able to realize your own creative potential. That is exactly what this society is designed to do. It doesn't care about people. It cares about the system. It cares about industry. Like I was mentioning in the start of the show, what's going on here with coal seam gas mining. This ridiculously sociopathic New South Wales environmental minister, I think his name's Ian McFarlane, has said that this is the most important industry to this state. Folks, there is no such thing as an important industry. What is important is people. No industry is important, not if people suffer at the hands of that industry. Again, folks, it's just a matter of perspective. mankind created industry to service mankind. So of course industry is not more important than mankind, and if mankind is suffering due to the actions of said industry, then that industry needs to be closed down immediately. To me, that's just common sense, regardless of whatever damage it does to whatever fictional economic model, because it is fiction. And commerce should not be allowed to interfere with the human experience. Commerce is simply a means of trade. It's nothing more. It is certainly not the be-all and end-all, and the economy, I believe, is the least important thing in any country. And many people may be shocked in that statement. They may be shocked and wonder how anyone could possibly think something so ridiculous as the economy being unimportant. But that is simply because these people are locked into the left brain, and they are fully locked into the system of commerce that has been superimposed over the human psyche. Because the system of commerce is a very, very insidious thing, and once it has been introduced over the human psyche and superimposed over reality, then anybody who has used that system finds it very, very difficult to think of life without commerce. It's almost like a mental virus or a psychic parasite that infects people up above it. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we can respect ourselves enough to respect the people around us so that we can all stand together. You see, there's too many people that just go down these rabbit holes and they find what they believe may be a remedy. And then their ego kicks in and they won't allow anybody else in. They won't listen to reason, and they want people to follow them down their rabbit hole. But they're not willing to step above it, and they're not willing to respect the people around them. They all want to have their own little method and go in there with fists clenched and guns blazing and take the system on. They want to do it on their own. They want to show that judge who is boss, and they find themselves locked up in a mental ward for doing so, because they didn't have the community standing behind them, because they got caught in their little rabbit hole and they went hell for leather down their own path, but they didn't disseminate the information through the community at large, or if they did, all they did was tell them their way. They weren't open to information or input from the people they were speaking to, because everybody has a piece of the puzzle. And folks, any remedy that you're looking for within the system, if it involves a piece of paper, then it's not remedy. Because everything on paper is fiction. Everything in that paper-based reality is fiction. Why do you have to follow the rules and regulations that the system gives you to extricate yourself or emancipate yourself from the system if you are already free? If you're a free person, why would you have to do that? Why do I have to follow their rules to establish my freedom? Why can't they show me why I'm not free? Because I believe that I am. I don't believe that there is any piece of paper that can change that fact. And if I choose to go down their path and to use their pieces of paper to establish my freedom, then how free do I think I am? Right from the onset, how free do I think I am? Why do I need to do that? Why do I need to use their paper to establish my freedom? It's their paper. It's got nothing to do with me. It's just this fictional paper-based reality that they believe is real. They've inflicted it upon me. But I'm not part of that system, so why do I have to use anything in that system to free myself? I'm already free. If I'm not free, and you're claiming I'm not free, show me proof of claim. That's my attitude to the whole thing, folks. And if enough people could understand this, and enough people could band together to stand up against this system, then we would find our remedy is right there. And it isn't that we need to stand up against it. We just have to be there if it comes for somebody. We have to be there to support them, so we can all stand together and just point out to whoever is attempting to inflict themselves upon our community member that what they're doing is supporting a fictional paper-based reality that is not real. It's interesting, really, isn't it, folks, when you think that the system itself isn't real. It only exists on paper. And yet when you claim that you are free and you attempt to establish your freedom and establish some form of sovereignty, then the judge or those who support the system has the nerve to tell you you need to be taken for a psychiatric evaluation when they are the ones who are believing that this fictional system is real. So really it is them who should be taken for the psychiatric evaluation, really, when you look at it. I mean, it's almost as if these judges are saying, oh no, you're saying that reality is real? No, you must be insane. Really, what is real is this fictional world that only exists on paper. And if you question that, you're a nutter and you need to be taken away. That's kind of what they're doing, folks. Again, it's the reverse of the truth. It's a complete polar opposite to reality, like most of the things this system does. But the thing is, and what's happening here, folks, is that, as I said, there are people that have found their way through the legal system. They've found their way through the paperwork, and the system has let them go ahead and do this. It's let them spend the last 4 or 5 years figuring out that all of this is fiction, and now that we've figured it out, too many people are still attempting to use the fiction to establish their freedom. And ultimately, the system doesn't care, because the system knows that it's all fiction. They know that the rules and the legislation are just words on pieces of paper. They don't care whether you do what they say or not, because they're not going to do what they say. They realise that there's a higher harmonic and that they are simply going to do whatever they want to do. I think that the system has actually been very grateful for people going down the free man rabbit holes and going down these pathways and attempting to find remedy and establish sovereignty from within the parameters of the system, because it's served to keep people distracted for a very long time, and it is served to protect the system. It's served to prevent people from ever actually standing up against the fiction, because people have been trying to find their ways through the fiction. They aren't realizing that it's fiction. It doesn't matter if you find your way through a fictional reality, it's still a fictional reality, folks. And that's why there is no legal remedy, and why there will never be any legal remedy to this situation. There's nothing you can do to establish your freedom from within the parameters of this system. There's nothing that mankind can do to establish its freedom from within the parameters of this system. Freedom for mankind will never happen until mankind collectively realizes that the system itself is fiction. And it's really important that people begin to understand that those that operate within the parameters of the system, they don't care if you find your way through, because they are going to do whatever they want to do anyway. The police will break any law that's in place in order to support corporate corruption. The media will defend their actions, and the politicians will get up on the podium and say how proud they are of the actions of their police and how we need more police to do such a fine job as these upstanding citizens are doing of protecting the laws of this country. And the vast majority of the population, the people who actually buy into what their television tells them, will simply swallow it, hook, line and sinker. And they will view all the people in the streets protesting and attempting to establish their freedom as simply unruly complainers, people who are just whingers, people who just want to complain about the government, and why don't they grow up and just get on with things instead of creating all of these problems. That's the way the vast majority of population will look at it. And that's the way they will react to any type of legal confrontation. That's the way this system will react to any type of social confrontation. That's the way it will react to protesters. That's the way it will react to any movements that are started. And that's why we need a movement that is not a movement. What we need is an idea whose time has come, which is why we need to begin workshops, public meetings, and begin to disseminate as much information and personal empowerment throughout our communities as we are each able to do. And that's what I hope to begin doing with the Full Circle Project next year, folks. It's a big ask, but that's what I intend to do. Because we're not going to find any way out of this situation until the public is re-educated on a vast scale. And I think if it's done in the right way, then we should be able to re-educate them back into simple common sense, because that's what all of this is. That's what your freedom is. That's what establishing remedy is. That's ultimately what the solution to this entire situation is, folks. It's common sense. It's for people to rediscover themselves and for people to rediscover reality and start participating in actual reality rather than participating in a paper-based fictional reality that they've been taught to believe is real. And we need vast amounts of the population to stand up and do this, folks, so we do need strength in our communities. And so that's where the focus must be. The focus to all of the problems that we face must be on a united and empowered community. Because that's where the remedy is, folks. Because animals have these advantages over man. They never hear the clock strike. They die without any idea of death. They have no theologians to instruct them. Their last moments are not disturbed by unwelcome and unpleasant ceremonies. Their funerals cost them nothing, and no one starts lawsuits over their wills. And that was said by Voltaire. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Max Igan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. We certainly have constructed a farcical system for ourselves, haven't we, folks? We've constructed a system that is all completely based in paper. It's a paper-based reality. And we seem to spend most of our times in life in fear of that which life may offer us, or in fear of that which comes after life. Most people that I've found in the world are extremely afraid of death, and yet death is the only thing in life which is inevitable. And as observed by Voltaire, we seem to have constructed all sorts of unpleasant ceremonies to surround us with during life and even during death. And it really has become somewhat of a farce, folks. And there are a great many people who have realized this. There are a great many people who have begun to awaken to the corruption of this system. And there's a great many people that have done what they can to find a way through the corruption of this system, to essentially find their way through the paperwork. Most especially here in Australia. We have a very large free man movement here in Australia. There's also a large free man movement in Canada and in England and in Ireland. Ireland actually seems to be leading the way in much of the sovereignty movement. But there are a significant amount of people that are attempting to go down this path in Australia. There are many people that are finding out about the significance of the birth certificate and all this sort of stuff, and they're doing what they can to bring the information to the rest of the world. And many people have had some reasonable amount of successes following this path, but now we are starting to see these sorts of remedies implode. We're starting to see now that more and more people are becoming aware of it. We're starting to see that the police just don't care, and that it doesn't matter how far you found your way through the paperwork, they are still just going to do whatever they want to do, regardless of you being right or not. We've seen this recently in the case of Adam Tucker in Victoria, a man called Edmund Hall in Queensland, who I believe is still in Townsville Hospital after suffering a stroke, after being locked in a mental health ward in Townsville, after receiving a brutal beating at the hands of police. And recently we have also seen a lady called Sue Mains, who is very well known in the sovereignty movement, very, very well known in the Freeman movement, someone who has very much found their way through the paperwork and has done everything right. She has recently been escorted from her property by police, even after demonstrating to the police that she was right on every count and that the documents they were using to evict her were not valid documents. Even with all of this on her side, what we saw was that the police simply do not care. They don't care if what you're doing is right. They don't care if what you're doing is lawful, and they don't care if they break the law. They don't care. They don't care if the government is conducting criminal activity. They don't care if the country is being raped by corporations, and they don't care if they themselves are breaking the law in their actions. They're simply not intelligent enough to think clearly. They're not intelligent enough to consider whether the laws they are enforcing may be valid or not. They simply don't care. Most of them are thugs and sociopaths anyway. They're not interested in what is right and wrong, and all they care about is supporting their corporate masters and supporting the corporate rape of this country and the impoverishment of its people. All they care about, folks, is supporting the slavery system. That's the role of modern-day police. I know someone who had his car broken into or his house broken into recently, and he asked the police to come around and do something about it, and all they did was take a report. And he said, well, look, it only just happened. Do you want to come around and get fingerprints and things? And they just couldn't be bothered. They just said, no, there's no real point in doing that, to just fill out a report and take it to the station. Because modern police in Australia, folks, are not interested in catching criminals. All they're interested in doing is collecting revenue for the government. And they will tell you that anybody who doesn't pay their revenue is a criminal. You know, there's places here where they've actually put up no standing signs and 2-hour parking signs in residential streets so that the people who live in the streets are not able to park their cars in front of their houses anymore. It's like London or something. It's ridiculous. You're not even allowed to use the street that you pay for because these criminal scumbags in government see it as a means of extracting revenue from you. See, this is what they're doing, folks. This is how they're milking the wealth from the population. This is the depopulation plan in motion, folks. That's how they're doing it. They're doing it economically. They're making it impossible for normal, everyday people to be able to survive in the current economic climate. And this is how they are going about creating more homeless people, which is, of course, how they are going about populating the prison systems. And it's pointless to call the police if you need help for anything in Australia, in the modern world, folks, because the police aren't interested in helping you. They're only interested in supporting corporate corruption and in collecting revenue from the population. Police in Australia are actually being hired as private security for logging companies in Australia, folks. That's how bad it's become, that these corrupt corporations are actually able to hire police as their security. So how do we ever expect to find any remedy from that situation? How do we expect to ever be able to prevent the corporate rape of this country, the destruction of the water table and the depopulation of the people, if the police are working to support this activity? Because that's what they do. And how do we find remedy when we are not able to use the paperwork? When we find a way through the paperwork, we've done everything right and we've presented it to the court, but we get thrown out of court and we get arrested and beaten by police anyway. How do we deal with this situation, folks? Well, the only way we deal with it is, rather than attacking the court, rather than standing up against police, rather than taking a stand on our own, we have workshops, we have public meetings, we disseminate the information to as many people as possible. We begin to respect ourselves so that we can begin to respect the people around us, and we realize that the people that are doing this are simply public trustees, and we all stand together to make some positive change. That's how we do it, folks, and that's the only way we will be able to do it. You see, there is no remedy in paperwork. It doesn't matter how far you've found your way through the legal system, or even all the work that I've done understanding how the legal system works, understanding concepts such as sui generis. I mean, all of these things, they worked for a while. People had successes using these methods, but now more and more people are finding out about it and more people are trying it. The government is just choosing to ignore it and to make examples of people. So what happens in that situation, folks? How does it help you when the system doesn't care? When the system doesn't abide by its own paperwork? It uses that paperwork against you, but it doesn't abide by it itself. And what do? You get railroaded and taken into court by corrupt police officers. You're there being defended by a corrupt lawyer who's got an allegiance to the bar, not you. You're being prosecuted by a corrupt prosecutor, and you're standing in a corrupt court run by a corrupt judge, who all work for the same system. Even the lawyer that you've got defending you works for the same system. He has a superseding oath to the bar. He doesn't owe any allegiance to you. He owes allegiance to the bar. So there is no remedy, folks. There is no legal remedy. There will never be any legal remedy. It doesn't matter about your birth certificate. It doesn't matter about anything, because it's all fiction. The whole lot is just a fictional reality. It only exists on paper. And we're not going to find a remedy until we